Hello. We are moving on to a topic of interest for many people, the crisis of the imperial order. Mainly, as you can see by the years that are posted and by the areas, we are in fact talking about World War One. Now, one thing to remember are all of the reasons, the various reasons as to what leads up the fuel, if you will, that is World War One. And first of all, the nations of Europe had competing goals, and that brought them into conflict with each other's despite alliances. First, Britain wanted to control the seas to protect its colonies. It had the largest colonial empire, but that caused conflict with Germany, which was making a navy as large as Britain's, and that causes conflict with Britain. France wanted revenge on Germany for the Franco-Prussian War. This caused France to oppose any German plan. Germany wanted to build a worldwide variety of empires and colonies like Britain had, and to do that, built a stronger navy. This caused conflict with Britain over the navy, but it caused conflict with a lot of other nations because territory in Africa, Asia, Australia, and America was already claimed. Austria-Hungary wanted to control the Balkans. This caused conflict with Russia, Italy, the Ottoman Empire, and, let's not forget, the Balkans. Italy wanted to control Dalmatia in the Western Balkans and have colonies in Africa. This caused conflict with Austria-Hungary and France. Russia wanted to control the Balkans and the Dardanelles to control a secure water port that was warm. This caused conflict with Austria-Hungary and the Ottoman Empire. And finally, Serbia wanted to unite all the Slavic people in the Balkans under Pan-Slavism. And this caused conflict with Austria-Hungary and the Ottoman Empire. The Balkans were also divided by religion. The Ottoman Empire wanted to protect its own personal interests. As you can see, look at the map, it has lost quite a bit of territory, and it wants to protect all what it has left. Oy vey. Nationalism, alliances, and the military strategy. The three main causes of World War I were nationalism, the system of alliances and military plans, and Germany's yearning to dominate Europe. Nationalism was deeply rooted in European culture, where it served to unite individual nations while undermining large multi-ethnic empires. Imbued with nationalism and largely unfamiliar with the reality of large-scale warfare, most people viewed war as a crusade for liberty or as revenge for past injustices. The major European countries were organized into two alliances. And these names will change, just so you know. The Triple Alliance is Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. The Triple Entente is Britain, France, and Russia. The military alliance system was accompanied by inflexible mobilization plans that depended on railroads to move troops according to precise schedules. After 1915, like I said, the names change. The Triple Alliance of Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy becomes called the Central Powers that consist of Austria-Hungary, Germany, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire. The Allied Powers, as they'll be called, were basically everybody else, Serbia, Russia, France, the UK, Italy, Belgium, the United States, and Japan. On June 28, 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand of the Austro-Hungarian Empire was assassinated. The German Empire under Kaiser Wilhelm II agreed to support Austria in retaliation against Serbia. The assassination of the Archduke invoked the alliance systems and obligations. Public opinion expressed in newspapers also supported the war, and most Europeans thought this would be a very short war and a chance for their country to show its patriotism. When Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia on July 28, 1914, the alliance system, in combination with the rigidly scheduled mobilization plans, meant that war was automatic. Now, here's the thing before we move on. Something you gotta know. So, Gerbald Princeps shoots Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie while they're in Sarajevo. And Serbia, well, Princep was in a group called the Black Hand. They're a terrorist group, and Serbia agrees to a number of conditions set forth by the Austro-Hungarian Empire. When Franz Ferdinand dies, there are 4 conditions that Serbia must meet. Conditions 1 through 3 were quite reasonable, but condition 4 was never going to happen because condition 4 of this deal said that Serbia had to agree to let the Austro-Hungarian police into the country to run the investigation against Princep, and that Princep would have to come back to Austria-Hungary for trial. Serbia said no. And here's the thing, guys. Austria-Hungary knew that Serbia would say no. They knew that Serbia would say no to this, and going in with this 4-point plan of theirs, they knew that was going to be their justification to declare war against Serbia, which they did. However, before the Austro-Hungarian Empire even declared war, Russia had already mobilized its troops. They were already on the get-go. Because Russia mobilized their troops, that caused Germany to mobilize their troops because Germany is allied with Austro-Hungary. Russia is allied with Serbia. Because Germany mobilized their troops, that caused France to mobilize their troops. Yeah. And with the von Schlieffen plan, or the Schlieffen plan, it's called either, in Germany, Germany ends up marching into Belgium, which is neutral. They're not armed. That's a big no-no. Great Britain said, you know what? We got your back. We'll declare war on Germany, Austro-Hungary as well, if Germany goes into Belgium. And sure enough, they did. So then Great Britain mobilizes. Good times. It's a chain reaction of events, folks. The Schlieffen Plan is the reason that Germany ends up taking the fall for the war because they marched into a neutral country. Just keep that in mind for like 10 slides. Anyway, moving on. Let's talk about the Great War. So we got a battle plan right here. Triple Entente, Central Powers, neutral nations, as well as extent of territory gained by either. The stalemate. The Western Front, folks. You got the Western Front that is all about trench warfare, and the Eastern Front, which is much more fluid. The nations of Europe entered the war in very high spirits because each of them were very confident that this was going to be an easy victory. And at first, it seemed that Germany was going to crush this and knock out of the park. They had a very, very advanced military. But German advances faltered in September. Again, the Schlieffen Plan didn't work. And both sides spread out until they formed a line of unbroken trenches called the Western Front, from the North Sea to Switzerland. The Germans advanced along the Western Front in 1914, and they were halted 20 miles from Paris. Trench warfare was a new tactic with horrific consequences for soldiers. Britain attempted to blockade German ports, and total war broke out between governments and societies across Europe and along the Eastern Front. Total war brought women into the conflict, but it gave them economic opportunities as well. And total war was particularly hard on Russia and soldiers and civilians. Now, here's the thing. What is total war? Total war is not just, oh, everyone's involved. Total war is when civilians are being targeted. Total war involves propaganda to get civilians involved. So think of those Uncle Sam wants you posters. That's total war. That is a deliberate target to get civilians to sign up for the military during an active conflict. So it's not exactly a bad thing. However, when total war targets civilians in a negative way, this is where you're going to see the bombing of London, the bombing of Berlin, the bombing in World War II of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It's where you have civilians or non-combatant military personnel who are being used as targets. The generals on each side tried for 4 years to take enemy positions by ordering their troops to change across the open fields, only to have them cut down by machine gun fire. For 4 years, the war was inconclusive on both land and sea. While military technology and military thinking is opposite of each other, they don't quite go hand in hand. Think about this, guys. You've got the idea of charge the front, which goes back to the American Revolution, the Civil War. But it doesn't really go with the new military technology because now you have machine guns, you have poisonous gas, You have tanks, airplanes, submarine warfare. Speaking of poison gas, we have advances in medical technology. So, folks, this is how plastic surgery came to be. This is the thing about gas, the mustard gas, the nerve gas that was used in World War One, is obviously you have bombs, you have shrapnel, but being hit by this gas could actually cause the flesh to, for lack of a better expression, melt off of your face. And what you see here is the evolution of plastic surgery. It's regrowing of tissue, regrowing of skin, and then slowly reconstructing the face over a period of months to years. Now, sometimes there was just too much damage done. And the image on the left is all of the same guy from start to finish. That's what he looked like in the very beginning. That's the final picture on the end. Now, obviously, you can still see their scar tissue, but there's a huge improvement as to what you see in the first picture. The photo in color, though, that is actually from Boardwalk Empire. That character's named Richard, and he's a World War I vet. He's hit by a bomb, and there's nothing that they can do. So he has what's called a faceplate, and it's taken from the intact portion of his face. It's painted to match his skin tone, and then it's held on by a pair of eyeglasses. And that, obviously, that's Hollywood, so his looks pretty good, but as you can see from the gentleman in the lower right picture, it's not as obvious. Or I should say it's more obvious, excuse me. All right, the home front and the war economy. So let's move on from plastic surgery. The material demands of trench warfare led governments to impose stringent controls over all aspects of their economies. Rationing and the recruitment of Africans, Indians, Chinese, and women into the European labor force transformed civilian life, and it gave women a taste of personal and financial independence. German civilians paid an especially high price for the war because the British naval blockade cut off essential food imports. And the same thing would happen in Russia. Food and fuel would become extremely limited because of a German blockade. British and French forces overran Germany's African colonies. In all of their African colonies, Europeans requested in food, imposed heavy taxes, forced Africans to export crops and sell them at low prices, and recruited African men to serve as soldiers and as porters. The U.S. grew rich during the war by selling goods to Britain and France. When the U.S. entered the war in 1917, businesses engaged in war production made tremendous profits. So why did the U.S. join the war in 1917? A year and a half before it was over. What happened? Well, there's two major events. First, as you can see, we've got some propaganda here. It's very nice. Recruiting women, guys, into the workforce. This is what total war is. Women join the workforce. The father who did nothing during the war. Don't be him, guys. Join the war. And don't waste bread. So again, targeting civilians and home life. But the two major events that forced the U.S. into the war, the first is the sinking of the Lusitania. In early May of 1915, several New York newspapers published a warning by the German embassy in Washington, D.C., that Americans traveling on British or Allied ships in war zones did so at their own risk. When World War I erupted in 1914, President Woodrow Wilson pledged neutrality for the U.S., and that was a position the majority of Americans favored. But Britain was one of America's closest trading partners, and tension soon arose between the U.S. and Germany because of the quarantine of the British Isles. Several U.S. ships traveling to Britain were damaged or sunk by German mines. And in February of 1915, Germany announced unrestricted submarine warfare in the waters around Britain. So we got a couple of problems here. Britain and the U.S. have a great trading relationship. When the U.S. tries to continue that trading relationship, they're being struck at by German U-boats, by the submarine warfare. But that's still not enough to get the U.S. involved. On May 7th, 1915, less than a year after World War I erupted across Europe, a German U-boat torpedoed and sank the RMS Lusitania, a British ocean liner en route from New York to Liverpool, England. Of the 1,900 passengers and crew members on board, more than 1,100 perished, including 120 Americans. Nearly 2 years would pass before the U.S. formally entered the war, but the sinking of the Lusitania played a significant role in turning the public opinion against Germany, both in the U.S. and abroad. And again, guys, that's what total war is. The Zimmermann telegraph, though, is what really pushes us in. Most historians agree that American involvement in World War I was inevitable by 1917. But this was accelerated by a letter penned by German Foreign Secretary Arthur Zimmermann. On January 16, 1917, British codebreakers interpreted an encrypted message from Zimmermann intended for Heinrich von Eckart, the German ambassador to Mexico. Instructions were given. If the neutral U.S. entered the war on the side of the Allies, von Eckart was to approach Mexico's president with an offer to forge a secret wartime alliance. The Germans would provide military and financial support for a Mexican attack on the U.S. In exchange, Mexico would be free to annex lost territory in Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. In addition, von Eckart was told to use the Mexicans as a go-between to entice the Japanese Empire to join the German cause. The Zimmermann telegram was decoded and handed over to the U.S. by the British government in late February of 1917. And by March 1st, the contents were splashed across the front pages of newspapers nationwide. Obviously, any thought of, resuming those diplomatic relations with Germany were gone. When Germany resumed unrestricted warfare in early February of 1917, that did a lot of damage. The Zimmermann telegram is really what finished it off. Many Americans remained committed to isolationism. President Woodrow Wilson had just won re-election by using the slogan, "He kept us out of war." But the Zimmermann telegram, he really couldn't do that. On April 2nd, 1917, Wilson abandons his policy of neutrality and asked Congress to declare war against Germany and the Central Powers. The U.S. entered war with the Allies against the Central Powers on April 6th. With fresh American troops, the Allies broke the front and pushed the Germans back. The U.S. commander, General Pershing, insisted on training his troops for a month in Europe before they actually went into battle. So the troops are very well prepared. The Ottoman Empire would join the war. The Turks signed a secret alliance with Germany in 1914. Turkey engaged in unsuccessful campaigns against Russia, deported the Armenians as well, which caused the death of hundreds of thousands, and closed the Dardanelles Strait. When they failed to open the strait by force, the British tried to subvert the Ottoman Empire from within by promising Emir Hussein ibn Ali of Mecca a kingdom of his own if he would lead a revolt against the Turks, which he did in 1917. In 1915, leaders of the Turkish government set in motion, I want to talk more about this, guys. They set in motion a plan to expel and massacre Armenians living within the Ottoman Empire. Though reports vary, most sources agree there were about 2 million Armenians in the Ottoman Empire at the time of the massacre. By the early 1920s, when the massacres and deportations finally ended, 1.5 million of Turkey's Armenians were dead, with many more forcibly removed from the country. Today, most historians call this event a genocide. The first time the word is actually used, a premeditated and systematic campaign to exterminate an entire people. However, the Turkish government does not acknowledge the enormity of scope of these events. Despite pressure from Armenians and social justice advocates throughout the world, it is still illegal in Turkey to talk about what happened to Armenians during this era. In the Balfour Declaration of 1917, the British suggested to the Zionist leader, Chaim Weizmann, that they would view with favor the establishment of a Jewish national homeland in Palestine. We're going to stop there for today. We'll pick up tomorrow with the double revolution in Russia. Have a great night, guys. Cheers.